Good afternoon, Crossway Church. This is May 13, and this is our midweek update video. We're going to do some announcements and some prayer and a little discussion here. Doug has our announcements.
Yeah, got a couple things to bring to your attention this morning. Good morning, everyone. Afternoon. We do have, as we've been doing all along, we're continuing on in our cancellations in keeping with the recommendations from our governor and seeking to work through this 1 week, one month at a time. So as of now, we're going to be canceling the rest of May, any meetings or Sunday services, with hopes of strategy towards June. I mean, really, that's what we'll be talking about in a few moments here. But really looking forward to meeting with you all. It's been a very long stretch. We miss you. And along with that, we are canceling, we did mention last week, our Community Day, which is June 7. That is our Crossway Mile. I personally am heartbroken. Steve is too. Now, you've been training. You and the whole family have been running regularly.
I wouldn't call it training, but yes, we were looking forward to it.
You're ready. You're ready to rock. Okay. But that will be canceled June 7. And then also our father-daughter camp out, which was going to be the following weekend, June 12 and 13, is also canceled. So that's where things stand with cancellations. It should be of no surprise, but that's where we're at. We're looking forward to being together again. Do have to connect with you about our upcoming women's meeting this coming Wednesday, May 20. Starts at 8 p.m. We're going to have a special online Zoom video meeting for all the women members of Crossway and their daughters ages 12 and up. So in order to access this meeting, you're going to have to register, ladies, by today. So when you hear this, please go to our website, or I'm sorry, you're going to receive an email. You have already received an email from Krista Winkler alerting you to this fact, and you should click on that link. Now, if you did not receive that email from Krista, please contact her as soon as possible so you can get that link and then register for this online event. You're going to need to register because then you will receive the details and the information on how to actually get into this Zoom meeting, okay? So ladies, that is next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Hopefully that provides you time to get the little ones and your husband settled before you jump on the call or jump on the video. And I look forward to bringing God's word from Romans 12, 1 and 2. And the topic will be discernment. It's a critical thing in a day and age when we're receiving information from any and all angles. The topic of discernment, biblical discernment, that's what we're going to hope to tackle in our time together. And ladies, just a couple things to be aware of with this meeting. You're going to be grouped in your care groups. During that Zoom meeting, you'll be lumped in with your other care group ladies, and your care group leader's wife will be leading a small group discussion after the teaching. So look forward to not only receiving God's word, but also interacting and discussing the truths of God's word together and sharing your lives through that meeting online. So that will, again, start at 8 p.m. on next Wednesday, May the 20th. All right, and then ladies, just received a whole lot of notes. Krista had received, as well as a few of us received, just your words of thanks, and we're very grateful that the Mother's Day surprise was pulled off. A lot of thanksgiving goes out to Krista Winkler and all the others and Marissa Biddings and the others who were involved in transporting and delivering the candy and the notes to all the mothers and grandmothers of Crossway. Grateful that it had a warming and encouraging effect to you in this time. And just one note, dads, don't expect the same kind of experience. We'll just do a long distance high five. Good job, Dad. Something meaningful like that.
We'll see.
Maybe if we even say that. No, I'm kidding. But it's, ladies, just grateful that had an effect as it did. Just to encourage you. And that was on behalf of the women's ministry team, as well as the pastors, and really representing the whole church, to thank moms and grandmoms for the way that you serve them and the way that you trust the Lord in all your service. So thank you for that, ladies. And then finally, we do have some sad news, as you would have received in your email this morning from Krista. Andy Knutsen's father, Peter, died yesterday afternoon. After a long bout with illness and weakness, he has passed. He did know the Lord, and there's great encouragement in that, but certainly much sorrow with Andy and his whole family. So let's lift them up in prayer. They need our prayers and support right now. So. Yeah.
Thank you. And we want to have a brief discussion here about the potential of reopening and meeting again. And as Doug mentioned, so I'll kick off with a few notes and then we'll have a little discussion about it. But as Doug mentioned earlier, we are going to cancel meetings throughout May. We thought this would be a good precautionary approach as well as easier to communicate. But then in June, we have our all-church care group June 3. And then, and so we're trying to figure out how the best way to approach that. But then also we have, starting June, the first Sunday there in June, which I think is June 7. Yeah. We would like to meet physically if possible. So our hope is, our thinking is, weather permitting, we'll meet in the amphitheater. We'll take, we'll issue recommendations as far as how to approach things. And probably a big note to mention here, and I think there's a few things we should touch on detail-wise, but a big note to touch on is, in general, because of biblical conviction, we call the church to meet together. And if someone's not meeting together, we're calling them to it. And we're saying, you need the meeting of the church. If you belong to Christ, you need the meeting of the church. And that's true. That remains true. But we also recognize during this time where we've taken a lot of precaution and we've been deferring to the proper government authorities and we're seeking to be considerate of one another. And as we bring all this together and we weigh out and bring these biblical principles together, we've recognized that we took a break from meeting to apply these biblical truths and principles to the life of the body at this time. Well, now as we move into meeting together, we also want to make it clear that if someone has a concern and they're not ready to meet together, even given the precautions we will be taking, if they're just not comfortable, if they're not there, our message to them is not going to be, you have to meet together. Our message to them is going to be, that's fine. Let's take some time. Let's give it a little time. Let's see how things go. We want to work with that person and what they might be feeling, what they may be thinking right now. And we want to take any sting out. We don't want the environment to feel like, well, if you're not meeting together, you're just doing what's wrong. Or the other side of that, where if you're meeting together, you're just throwing off all caution and throwing caution to the wind. We want to take the sting out of that. We want to do the best we can with the biblical principles we have, being as considerate of one another as we possibly can, and bringing God the most glory that we can, right, while at the same time caring for the church as best as we can. And so you can see some of these things are challenging, but we believe it's a temporary season, and this is the way we're going to approach it. We're going to open it up for a little discussion here, but I just want to add this, and probably need to come back to it at the end, because I would rather over-communicate on this point and make it very clear. We're looking to do something here in June. We can't guarantee it yet. We don't want to set it in stone. We'll keep you up to date. We're working toward that end. We're doing what we have to do to get everything spun up and get ready to meet together. But we'll keep you up to date, and hopefully we'll have a little more confirmation next week and the week after in these midweek update videos. So keep it as a tentative, something we'd like to do, something we're working toward, but also to be ready to say, okay, we need a little more time or something like that. And it may change to some degree. So just be ready for that, the potential of change. I have a couple of other thoughts and maybe details coming to mind, but do you guys want to raise any?
I just have a picture of, one thing to avoid is that this somehow becomes like a "don't tread on me" moment, or that we, that for any of us, that this could be a moment that we were tempted to feel trampled, our concerns, our questions being trampled upon. That both extremes, really, I think you said well, that this is going to be a heightened time of consideration. Yeah. That no one's going to view this as, here we are. Right. We're going to do so with love and rejoicing, but much consideration and charity to one another. But with the key that we need to begin to strategize and work towards regathering. That's what the church has to do. Yeah. So. Yeah, well said. And also we want to make it clear, we don't mean to
We don't mean to cast anyone's position as an extreme position. We're recognizing there are polls. There's one poll that says we should not meet until there's a vaccine. And there's another poll that says the government is illegitimately taking away our rights to meet and now impinging on the life of the church. And we're saying, yeah, we recognize there are polls and there's a sliding scale of folks in between. And so if we refer to extremes, we just mean those polls. We don't mean to say you're extreme in your perspective. Although that's possible. People can be extreme in their perspective.
It certainly can.
And they need to be aware of that. But we don't want you to think that immediately if you hear that, we're saying, oh, you're just so extreme and therefore you're wrong. But rather, we're trying to incorporate the reality in the situation of these polls at a time when we don't have all the data and we're seeking to apply biblical principle as best we can.
Yeah, I think it's worth raising the idea of conscience. So no doubt all of our consciences are in different places depending on the studies, data, inputs we've received, the conversations we've had, our own personal experiences. One thing I want to encourage you to is, and one of the great advantages for Christians is fellowship. We have biblical fellowship. And so don't view where you're at with coming to church or going to work or any of those things as just your private domain that you work out yourself. Like engage your care group. This is exactly the sort of stuff that care groups should be talking about and helping one another. So as Christians, we need to follow our consciences, but we also need to calibrate our consciences biblically. And part of that calibration comes in our fellowship with one another. And so for the person who's saying, all Christians should wear a mask and we should be very, very, very wary of any sort of engagement outside. And then for the person who's saying, all this is ridiculous and we should just go, back into life the way it was. It's easy to, with those polls and anywhere in between, to just kind of steamroller forward. It's like, no, so you have conscience, but then you have consideration, which is so much what we've been talking about. How does love for one another work out in these contexts of the church? The church should, of all places, be a place where these conversations are going on, where we're actually seeking the good of one another, we're loving one another and how we engage. We're going to have a lot of opportunities for that in the weeks and months ahead. This isn't, when we do start to meet together again, it's not like, oh, magic, everything's back to normal. That's going to take time, One of the questions I found helpful is, am I looking at other people primarily as a viral threat to my health? I think that could be one of the effects of this time is, there's danger there. Instead of, no, this is a person in the image of God that I have an opportunity to love and engage and care for. And I need to be wise in how I do that, but they're not just a threat, So even things like that just encourage you to reach out to others, let them know where you're at, engage them humbly, allow them to speak into your life, you speak into their lives. That's how we sharpen and care for each other.
Good. Yeah, I think on the topic of consideration as well, I think it's worth raising the idea of greeting one another. And the scriptures teach us to greet one another warmly. There's that thread of the holy kiss. And
Hi.
now I have to sanitize my entire being.
Just glad he didn't give you a holy kiss.
And we've talked about this before where, with the holy kiss, we apply it differently. It's meant to be, was basically culturally acceptable in terms of warm greetings. And we've done a lot of handshaking. That's always been my preference. And hugging too. People tend to hug, and that's a wonderful expression of affection. And I hope that we can get back to that place. But I do want to encourage consideration when it comes to how are we going to greet one another. And this is not a time to impose on others. That's the opposite of consideration. Right. So you might feel strongly about, I need to show someone an affectionate greeting in order for them to know how much I care for them. And the temptation, I think, for this person can be, I don't care what the government says, I don't care what the recommendations of the church are, I'm just going to do it. But I think what you have to see there in that moment is that you might be making that moment more about yourself than about those principles. You're saying, because I feel confident and comfortable, and this is my preference, I'm going to assume that it's yours. And this is not the time for that, where that might have some flexibility in most times, and where the concept of an affectionate greeting is something I've taught in the past from the pulpit of Crossway Church. It's recorded somewhere. Yeah. And believe it's a biblical reality that you do want to demonstrate the love that you have for someone else in the greeting. But just like we may be taking a little bit of a different tact right now on calling people to meet together, not because we lack the biblical conviction that they ought to meet, but because we're aware of this temporary period of time where we're trying to apply biblical principle as wisdom across the board. The same thing's true here in terms of greeting one another. And so I encourage you, if you were to ask someone, hey, do you mind if I give you a hug? Do you mind if I shake your hand? You can do that in a couple of ways. You can ask that in a way that seeks to accomplish your desired end and is essentially somewhat of a manipulation. Or you can ask that in a way that's really caring about them. And so, right now we recommend not shaking hands, not hugging, of acknowledging social distancing. But if you are going to try to do more affectionate greetings, please make certain that the other person really does feel the same way that you feel. And let me add this, for the rest of us, if you see people shaking hands, don't hold up the sign of the cross like you've just seen a vampire or something. In other words, don't become self-righteous toward them. But think the best. Recognize they may have decided that they want to greet each other like that. And you don't have to have hard thoughts of those people, but rather you can have loving thoughts of them. Say, they must have agreed. I'm not comfortable with that yet. Personally, I'm not. I would not like that. I don't think we should. I don't want to go around shaking and hugging right now. But maybe we get back there. I'd like to get back there as soon as we can. So just keep that in mind and make sure that you're applying consideration. Now I launched off there. That's quite a sermonette. But
that's quite a. I mean, the idea of personal conscience. That's that intersection there. It's the person who's observing another two people greeting each other, their personal conscience may have attached to it a long, thick cable of, if I shake another person's hands, I'm endangering possibly elderly people, or I'm putting in danger's way those who are compromised with health. And so in their estimation, the activity has all of a sudden been loaded with a very conscionable, understandably, right, a very conscionable activity to endanger someone else's life. Whereas the other two people engaging in that activity have different places to stand on that same topic. That is such a sensitive, difficult thing to try to work through in our own hearts. And I think your point of conscience goes right at that, Steve.
I think another big area is kids. And so to just recognize a few things. So as parents, I think we should start to talk to our kids about, hey, when we get back together, you can't just run up to your friends and tackle them. You're going to be so excited to see them. But I think we also have to recognize it's unrealistic to think that kids are going to always maintain. Although I did see a guy who had a hula hoop around himself. We could do that, giant pillows.
We could provide hula hoops for the children with a harness.
So to just recognize as parents, we're going to have to navigate that too. And to recognize there will never be a risk-free time to come to church. And you're going to have to navigate risk whenever and however you come. And there's wise and foolish ways to look at risk, but it's always risk. And so just to even start to have that conversation in fellowship with God, with your kids, it's there's going to be challenges all around us that have always been there to some extent, but we're much more aware of them now. And so the encouragement is that's actually an opportunity to walk in faith. Before we might have been walking in, I don't mean this in a harsh way, but in ignorance. Like you just don't even think about it. Of course I shake somebody's hand. Of course now you got to think about it.
Yeah.
And so, okay, let me trust God and engage in love.
Yeah.
You
good.
know.
Yeah.
It's all good.
And as we go forward, we'll put out recommended guidelines, Lord willing, as we're able to meet. Just to give you a little more detail, what we're thinking is that, weather permitting, we meet in the amphitheater, and we have an abbreviated service. Some of you like the sound of that right away. So maybe an hour and 10 minutes, something like that. And the idea would be that everyone brings their own, every person or every family brings their own chairs. And we believe there's enough room in the amphitheater where we could set up properly distant. The units could, we'll use the old banking term, the giving units can properly distance throughout the amphitheater with their own chairs. And then the nice thing there is the surfaces that are touched don't need to be cleaned. So the chairs that you bring, I mean, you could clean them on your own, but you bring them, you set them up, then you take them with you as you leave. And there's less work for our setup and tear down. We'll probably provide some chairs for those that forget or for some guests that may come. And those we'll wipe them down. We'll probably put them near the top. Probably in the amphitheater, we would, either the patio or the deck itself would be a good place for our seniors so that they don't have to navigate the stairs of the amphitheater. And there's a couple of other thoughts that are slipping my mind right now. Communion, we're looking at those prepackaged communion cups with the little wafer on top. So Lord willing, when we get together, we're hopeful that we can come to the Lord's table together, although do it in a considerate and safe manner. We'll have to figure out how to do that. But our first step is to order those. We're hoping they'll be in on time. Apparently they're somewhat back ordered right now.
Understandably.
Yeah.
Goodness.
You guys think of any other details? Masks, we would make that optional. So we're not going to require them. But rather, if you would like to wear a mask, you feel more comfortable wearing a mask, you think it's best to wear a mask, by all means wear a mask. It's fine. We may ask our ushers to wear masks. We'll look at that possibility. Probably anyone that has to be in a serving capacity will have them wear a mask to be on the safe side. Child and Trust Children's Ministry and Child Care, we won't be offering that at first as part of the reason why we would have an abbreviated meeting. So sort of like we do for Sunrise Service or Good Friday, the kids are in there, we work with that. And there'll be other questions like bathrooms, will they be open? We'll have to look at the precautions. In other words, if we can open them in a way that's safe and doesn't require so much effort either before or after to get them ready, we'll probably do that. But we got to figure that out, and we'll keep up to date on some of those things.
And then one last note is like video. I do think at least for a season, we'll likely offer live streaming of any of our physical gatherings.
Yes.
So that if there is someone or a couple or a family that isn't comfortable, that they would be able to access, at least watch the Sunday service from a distance.
Yeah.
So we're looking to that.
Yeah, good, very good.
And the mask is a great opportunity to show practical consideration, because the temptation is to read into the motives of others. You know, someone's not wearing a mask to think badly, like, oh, they're being so cavalier and foolish, or someone is wearing a mask, oh, they're just mired in fear. You know, it's let's presume love and presume faith on each other as we evaluate this.
Excellent. And for the vulnerable population, I think it's becoming increasingly clear. It really has been for a while, but it's increasingly clear. We've got to be mindful of our vulnerable population, which includes especially senior citizens, our more seasoned members, let's put it that way. And we want to be especially mindful of them. Certainly we would understand if it's not a good time for us, for our older members to not come That's completely understandable. There may be others within the vulnerable population, or you're connected to someone who's very vulnerable and you have to interact with them. And so maybe it's a good time not to come. Completely understandable. However, if folks in that category do want to come, again, we want to think the best. We want to think lovingly, and we want to be as considerate as we possibly can. And so we're going to look to be as loving as we can during this time for those folks. Any other details you guys can think of?
I think sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. Steve's going to give us some prayer requests.
Yeah.
Things we can keep in mind.
Good. Yeah, I have a few items. So a few to keep in mind. Alex Funk and his father Philip. Please continue to pray for that family, and Ben and Jasmine Brown, Matt and Mary Brown, as Ben continues chemotherapy and the challenges of that. Please do pray for them. These situations tend to be marathons, not sprints, right? And so pray for endurance, for steadfastness, for the grace of God to meet them in expected and unexpected ways. Also wanted to make you aware of a couple new situations that we haven't raised before. So Dan Davis, many of you would know that Dan's had some challenges with strokes and Lyme's disease, and so the challenges to his health right now are significant. And so Dan and Carol are asking for prayer, so please do pray for them, show your love to them. And then Ellie Coiro, which would be Tom and Loretta Bushy's granddaughter, Pamela's daughter, has been hospitalized, going through some significant health challenges. So please do pray for all those families. Pray for little Ellie, that she would know God's grace in the midst of her struggles. And then finally, just a reminder to continue to pray for those who are out of work or whose work has been cut way back. Please do continue to just check in with one another, pray for one another, send encouraging notes to one another. My kids have been reintroduced to the joys of the postal system, so they're sending letters, and it's so fun, for them to get a letter in the mail with their name on it. It's a great way to show love and care for someone. So,
Just don't seal it with a kiss.
Right.
That's all.
Yeah.
Just don't lick or kiss.
Yeah.
We love you. We miss you. We're praying for you, and we hope to be together again soon. Let's pray along those lines.